It's 9 o'clock. I'm Jeff Malinoff with your top stories. On the table right now, a new plan for a ceasefire in the war between Gaza and Israel. ABC chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell has the details from Tel Aviv.
President Trump and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff submitting this new ceasefire and hostage release plan with Israeli backing. The idea is a 60-day ceasefire, the release of 10 living hostages and the bodies of 18 others. In exchange, Israel would release some Palestinian prisoners, withdraw its forces to a buffer zone and allow more vital aid in.
News in D.C. Back and forth rulings over President Trump's wide-ranging tariffs earlier this week. The Court on International Trade in New York struck down many of the tariffs put in place on imports from countries around the world, ruling that only Congress has the power to impose tariffs in order they be rolled back. Now that's on hold after the Trump administration appealed to the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. ABC News national correspondent Stephen Portnoy spoke with the ABC podcast.
The judges of that court said that Wednesday night's ruling by the court in New York is going to be paused, at least temporarily, as both sides, both the Trump administration and the small businesses and states that filed suit, put forward their early filings in this appeal.
There's a new push to deal with the ongoing pollution mess in California. Details from ABC's Andrew Dimbert.
New calls for action as a years-long pollution crisis grows worse on the West Coast. Experts say up to 60 million gallons of toxic waste are flowing from the Tijuana River in Mexico into the Pacific Ocean each day. As a result, some beaches in Southern California have been closed for years. Now, a new study warns of the growing health risk for people up the coast as far as La Jolla, north of San Diego.
The EPA is proposing a plan to work with Mexico on the issue, but some officials are asking President Trump to declare an emergency. Housing market news as the slowdown in the market is due to the low number of buyers. Details from ABC's Andrea Fuji.
Home sellers now outnumber the buyers by the largest number in 12 years. Analysts say it's not because homes are getting cheaper. In fact, they say it's likely because buyers are simply leaving the market, giving up. Prices have been climbing for nearly 2 years, and mortgage rates were up again last week.
Market money news brought to you by Beacon Capital Management online at beaconcm.com. Stocks after the first 30 minutes of the market being open, everything is still pointing downwards, but not as bad as before. Dow is down 2, S&P down 18, and NASDAQ down 121, all below 1%, and Dow is almost on the ups after being down 2. That's the latest news. Traffic and weather is next. I'm Jeff Malinoff, WTN News.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith. Happy Friday to all the haters and losers out there. All the winners, too. Trump was a winner today, or I guess yesterday, technically. The appeals court put a stay on the hold on the tariffs. So the trade court said, nope, this is not going to stand. Appeals court said, you know what? We're going to pause that because this is a lot of change, and we'll talk about that in the show. We got a lot to talk about today. We've got Mayor Freddie O'Connell. He's feeling the heat. He's feeling the pain right now because enforcing the law is not something he's interested in doing. He acts as if he doesn't understand why we would enforce immigration laws and why it would be useful for local authorities to connect with that. We've got volunteer squads out to give the heads up to anyone out there who is violating the immigration laws in case they see the federal government agents moving to, do their job. We've also got Congress. Well, I would love to report on Congress, but they haven't done anything. And so we're going to talk about that. That's a recurring theme. The good news, they've actually enacted more resolutions of regulatory disapproval. They have also enacted exactly 3 laws since January. So really just rooting for those guys to do their job. And we'll talk about how this connects to what's happening with Mayor O'Connell. That's, I think, interesting. But I want to get started with, it's kind of the way I start every time I fill in, because I always hate it when people don't tell me where they're coming from. If they've got side gigs and other things, and then I don't know what their viewpoint is. And I want to make sure that you guys do. We've got KGB on news, so I want to say that that's just great. I mean, all the best news. I mean, Joan's pretty great, but when you get KGB in here, I mean, you never know what happens. We've got Mason and Louie on the board. We got 2 people behind the glass. I mean, does it get more exciting? I think not. During the day, I work at Thanks, which helps businesses grow with gratitude. If nothing else today, it's Friday. Be thankful for something. I liken this. It's cool working at a company where gratitude is the business. But I've learned a lot about appreciation, and most of us are appreciative, but we don't tell anyone. We say, oh, man, I really appreciate my colleague, my friend doing that thing. And you know who we failed to tell? The colleague or the friend. It's sort of like wrapping your Christmas presents, sticking them in the closet, and never giving it to anybody. So my ask for this Friday, I mean, I'm hyped up. I was listening to a lot of techno this morning, so it got weird on the drive in. It was Armin van Buuren, Bach to the Future, so it was classical mixed with techno. It's okay, folks. It's okay. It's different. It's what I use to kind of get hyped, get productive. Share your gratitude. Tell people you appreciate them. When they do the little things for you, say thank you. Give somebody a call. I know it's not our jam anymore. We don't talk to people. We don't like human contact. We want to text or I don't know, just say bruh. It happens a lot in my house with 5 boys. But I think it's really important. So I would just encourage you guys to take a minute today to show your appreciation to somebody. Phone call, little note, whatever you need. Do that. I'm also a partner in a media company. We made Ballad of Davy Crockett. You want to see a fun movie with your kids? Go check it out on Prime. It's if you want to see a tomahawk split a musket ball, then I got you covered. Basically, we got a couple of buddies and I got tired of Hollywood dumping trash into our homes. And we said, well, I wonder if we could do this. And we did. And we're going to keep trying to do it. So very excited. There's a bunch of great groups in Nashville right now that are trying to make media projects. And frankly, what's a very changing landscape. It just isn't the same month to month, year to year right now because of all the advances in technology and production. So anybody who's in that brave world, I appreciate it, man. I mean, let's fight the good fight. Let's try to entertain and encourage people and not just dump trash in their houses. So that's another thing. I'm also, Matt Murphy jokes that I'm over in liberal closet or conservative closet at the Tennessean. I'm on the editorial board and I'm a columnist over there. And I really appreciate you guys reading my stuff. I'm going to tell you guys what happens when I write a column, and y'all are going to have a fun time with it. Because conservative viewpoint, sometimes, I know this will shock you, that when you have a conservative viewpoint, sometimes the left doesn't like it and they let you know. But I really enjoy that. I really appreciate you guys. Give me topics to write about and talk about. There's a lot going on, so picking out topics that interest you guys. I'm here for you guys. This show is here for you guys. 615-737-9986. You know the number. Call in. The phone lines are open. Happy to chat about what you want to talk about on this Friday, or just join the text line. John said, thank you for addressing us winners and the loser, Freddie. So I see you, John. I got it. We've got Tom Holman here trying to figure out what's going on. Here's a little fact. I'll just drop this and leave it for a minute. Did you guys know it's actually part of the law in Tennessee to cooperate with federal officials? Yeah, it is. Public chapter number 716. It says this: all law enforcement agencies and officials shall communicate with the appropriate federal official regarding the immigration status of any individual, including reporting knowledge that a particular alien is not lawfully present in the United States, or otherwise cooperate with the appropriate federal official in the identification, apprehension, detention, or removal of aliens not lawfully present in the United States. That law has been on the books since July 1, 2024. So I don't know what we're doing here. Look, I get the political show. Freddie's virtue signaling to his friends and his constituents and saying, I'm here for you. The big meanies enforcing the law are bad. And everybody else around that show is trying to act like they're going to get to the bottom of it. I mean, Andy Ogles, for example, calling Freddie O'Connell out. Fine. I'm unaware of the law enforcement capacity of Congress. Do we really need hearings and congressional investigations into this? We already know what he's doing. He's not cooperating. He does not want to do this. So here's the deal. If he's violating the law, prosecute him. You don't need visits. You don't need somebody to come in and say, I am going to walk around and see if he's cooperating. No. If he's violating the law, prosecute him. If he's not violating the law, I don't see how. Just in Tennessee law, sue him and say, hey, you're violating the law that's already on the books. It's a state law. It's not a federal law. And that means Nashville is not going to be eligible for grants and other things. If we win in court, either you cooperate or we create pain for Nashville. There's a way to do it. Meanwhile, we have all these elected officials saying, dangerous line, Mayor O'Connell, stuff like that. Whatever. We are such a navel-gazing culture that we want to talk about it rather than do something about it. 8602 says, assert the man for goodness sake. That is, I believe, a typo from when you talk to your phone, you get weird things. I think he means arrest the man. I don't know if just to be blunt, I don't know if there's a cause to arrest him. I know that shocks you guys, but I think the right answer based on Tennessee law is to sue Nashville and say, hey, you're violating the law because you're not cooperating here. In fact, you're intentionally trying to avoid cooperating. Mayor O'Connell's a smart guy. So he's very much in the same, I'm not skirting the law. I'm sort of walking this line to try to not violate it in a criminal sense, but I'm clearly not playing ball. And so I think that a lawsuit's the right answer. The Tennessee Attorney General can file suit. You know, the reason I think people are not wanting to do that is because, let's be honest, Nashville's a cash cow. It is a center of commerce and tourism and everything for the state of Tennessee. And so if it becomes a political battleground, that's probably bad for the state in aggregate. But there's a way to deal with this that doesn't involve, how do I say this? It doesn't involve a real battle. It's just, hey, you got to cooperate. That's part of the law. You've got a law enforcement agency and official. You got to do this. Brian says, can he read the law? Yeah, Brian, he can. But this is just sort of the nature of politics at the moment. He's doing something because he wants to, even if it's not consistent with the law, and then he's dealing with it in the courts. You know who else does this? Donald Trump. He does things and then says, sue me. Mayor O'Connor's kind of doing the same thing. It's just in a liberal direction. 8507 says, just because something is a law doesn't make it just. Unjust law should not be followed. Equals good citizen versus good man. Sure. But the whole point here is that if you don't like immigration law, you know what you should do first? Try to enforce it. I know that sounds crazy. You don't like immigration law. And I wrote a column about this. Go check it out at the Tennessean. If we start from a place of not enforcing the law, we get these inconsistencies all over the state, all over the country. So let's start by enforcing it. And if you don't like the results, because I'll be honest, there are areas of immigration law that we need to reform. The stuff with the dreamers, that's a weird situation. You got kids who came here as babies because their parents brought them here. They've never known another country. It's just a weird situation. Have a little empathy for that position and say, okay, what do we need to do here that's consistent with the rule of law and enforcing the laws on the books? Okay, cool. Then we go to Congress. Oh, wait, Congress doesn't do anything. 3879 says, picking which laws you enforce is bull something. I agree. I actually think you must start with enforcement on immigration law and then go from there. You're not going to like all the outcomes here. We have not enforced the law for so long that it's going to create a problem. It's going to create a problem for families. And you can be as hardtail as you want about immigration, but we also need to be human beings. So let's continue the conversation. You guys certainly want to. We got to take a break. Christian and Debbie, I see you on the phone line, and we'll talk. I'm Cameron Smith. It's the Chris Hand Show on Super Talk 99.7.
New questions about government oversight of the cryptocurrency and a new reward for the escaped convict in Arkansas. Those stories and more coming up at 9:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
That's a lot of bass. I'm feeling like Iggy Azalea almost. I mean, you never know.
Do you know who that is?
No.
It's Eminem.
Really?
Yeah. That's Godzilla by Eminem.
Ooh, I like it. It's solid.
Highly recommend.
Very good
Chris
music.
Han is a rapper connoisseur, I feel like.
Which, if you look at the man, you know.
Would never expect it.
Nope.
Oh, yeah, no, it's definitely out of left field for sure.
I think, you know who, when I see Chris, I cannot think of anything but that Just for Men box that, you know, has the man with the perfectly done beard. And it's like, no gray hair here.
You know what? He's not even on vacation. He's like in Broadway somewhere doing rap battles in the alley. You know?
Probably.
That's his secret lifestyle. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah, he's who they based Epic Rap Battles of History off of. He was doing those in his free time.
We should just start calling him Rabbit.
Maybe.
Let's do it. Chris Han, Rabbit. I love it. So a couple things, and then we'll get to y'all's calls. Okay, guys. When you hear me say we need to be human on the way out of the segment, I'm not saying we shouldn't enforce the law. In fact, hear me out. We should fully enforce the law as duly enacted by Congress. Full stop. However, we have had Republicans and Democrats. Look, I worked on Capitol Hill. I was in the Senate. I was on Senate Judiciary. I'm an attorney who literally pushed back. I worked for Jeff Sessions, and we pushed back against George Bush mass amnesty. So I began my career fighting for consistent immigration law enforcement. So I agree with you. However, the idea that these folks are not human beings, that we just kind of treat them like numbers, gets you to a bad place. So I do think there are populations, like I mentioned, the dreamers, that we should actually have a conversation about and say, okay, well, what are we going to do? Because they didn't have any choice to be brought here. They were brought here as kids. And now they don't really have a quote unquote home country to go to. And we're saying, well, you're not citizens here. So we should probably have that discussion. That's all. Just have a discussion. And I don't believe in this zero-sum game that we have to treat people incredibly poorly. We have to treat migrants poorly because, you know, we have other Americans that have needs. Well, we should treat everybody with respect. As a Christian, I'm not going to change my treatment of other human beings, but I am going to enforce the law because that's our process. And the moment that I stop enforcing the law is when I'm substituting my judgment for the process that we've agreed to for how we make laws. I mean, that's it. Jason wants to know, who is this new guy that's taking Chris's spot? Yes, Jason, I intentionally left out your insult, but I love you. You know what's fun? I've been doing this now long enough, between the All the Best Words podcast, which you guys should check out. Matt and I are having so much fun doing it. I want to know what you think. And the, filling in for Matt a lot and other folks, the other hosts, I get to know you guys, and it makes it a lot of fun. So I appreciate that, and it's great. Trevor says they're not migrants, they're benefit thieves. I mean, they can be, but a lot of times they're paying in, not taking benefits out. Again, it doesn't matter how we feel, because this shouldn't be laws by feeling. It should be, we have a process. We went through that process. We created laws, and we need to enforce them. That's just the way it has to be. We shouldn't want a situation where we say, well, I feel like this should really super be enforced. And then Mayor O'Connell over there is like, but like you're just being meanies. Well, okay, but that's not the point. The point is we have laws. We are a nation of laws and not of men, because the moment we're a nation of men where we just feel like we should enforce it. And frankly, that's the reason I've criticized some of the Biden pardons and some of the Trump pardons, because when you say, okay, we went through the legal process, you were convicted by a jury of your peers of the crime in question, and then we say, nah, just kidding because I like you, then we run away. So that to me is a big deal. And I think Mayor O'Connell, by trying to be a soft-hearted guy, is actually putting us in a bad way. We got to take a break. This is the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith, and this is Super Talk 99.7.
It's 9:30. I'm Jeff Malinoff with your top stories. That weather is coming up in just a little bit. New questions about government oversight of the cryptocurrency industry after the world's largest crypto exchange began listing a cryptocurrency started by Trump's family. ABC News chief investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky has a story.
It's the latest sign that the Trump administration is turning away from crypto enforcement, and it happens to coincide with a benefit to the Trump family. The Securities and Exchange Commission dropping its lawsuit against Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange, ending one of the last remaining crypto enforcement actions from the prior administration, which had accused Binance of mishandling customer money and other violations.
A new reward for information in the expanding manhunt for convicted murderer and former Arkansas Police Chief Grant Hardin near the border of Missouri. ABC's Faith Abube in Arkansas.
As people are driving through this area this morning, they're being handed flyers from the FBI showing there's up to $10,000 on the table for information leading to his arrest. Search crews are still scouring wooded areas, abandoned houses, even caves, trying to locate the 56-year-old.
Harvard University won a temporary reprieve with President Trump's attempt to revoke visas from Chinese immigrants who are connected to the Chinese Communist Party. On graduation day, a judge allowed Harvard to enroll foreign students, but then a new escalation that could impact universities across the country. ABC's Selena Wayne in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio announcing the U.S. will work to aggressively revoke visas of Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. Former ambassador to China Nicholas Burns, now a Harvard professor, telling us there's already a rigorous vetting process.
Those who are a security risk should not have a visa, but that probably excludes the vast majority of the applicants.
As for that warning to Chinese students, it's unclear how many could be targeted.
Right now, looking at the stock numbers after 1 hour of the stock being open, Dow is now pointing upwards at plus 27, but S&P 500 and NASDAQ are both down 6 and 27, respectively. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Jeff Malinoff, WTN News.
Yeah, this is good. I like it. The Just for Men rabbit. I love it. That's a good, I can work with that. Welcome back to the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith. We're going to get to property taxes around 10 o'clock. I'm trying to have a guest on that can answer some questions in my hometown, Nolanville, but who has some knowledge about the county. And this is actually just a big issue in Middle Tennessee. You got Nashville property tax increases, Williamson County, in my world town of Nolanville. They're kind of all over the place. And my property taxes would go up 50%, something like that. Maybe a little less, but as a conservative, my general response is I do not like that. I would not like to do that thing. However, I am willing to have an open mind about the conversation. Well, the area is growing. People are moving in. We have so many different infrastructure needs, public services, such as fire and police. I was even looking at a breakdown. Did you know the Glock that the police officers are equipped with, we're paying $1,250 for that thing? You know, it's got the red dot, and I don't know which red dot site is on there, but I mean, whew. Anyway, we'll get to that around 10 o'clock. We'll see if we can make that happen. But I want to finish this conversation on immigration. Occasionally, I will read what Jason writes. He just wrote, property taxes are up like they've taken some dang Viagra. Well, it's looking that way. It is looking that way. I do think the problem with immigration here is there's not a lot of good answers that make a whole lot of sense. It's enforce the law on the books. Yeah, but you know what? Our laws are really outdated. This is a clunky old system that Congress has not done anything with in a very long time. We should update it. We have a ton of technology. We have the capacity to say, what are our economic needs? Where do we not have the labor force and where do we need it? Okay, these are the immigrants we should prioritize over these other ones. But again, if you don't start from a point of enforcement, none of that really matters. New Zealand has a good system. When I worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee, one of my jobs was to look at other systems around the world. And the truth is there's a lot of systems that do it different than the United States and a lot of systems that do it better. There are point systems that say, hey, we need nurses. So if you have nursing experience, we're going to prioritize you and you get extra points because we don't have enough nurses. Or we need a neurosurgeon, or we need a AI programmer. Whatever the need is, we prioritize the American interest and say, let's do it. Actually support that. Do I support the visa lottery? Some of you guys know what that is, where we basically have an allocation and then people get to come and they don't have to demonstrate, hey, here's an economic interest. Yeah, I think so. I mean, the huddle mass is yearning to be free. I do think asylum is something we should consider, but the way we do it is stupid. It's not good. Anybody can claim asylum. James Lankford, y'all remember his immigration reform bill that was torpedoed. It overhauled that. Some of that language is incredibly good. The problem is we just don't touch it. We play immigration football with the executive branch, and so Trump is super enforcement, and then the next Democrat will be super not enforcement, and it'll be so confusing for everyone. And I want to get on Congress about this. This is absolutely ridiculous. I'm gonna hit refresh on my browser so I get you the latest. In the 119th Congress, hear me out, guys. From January 3rd, 2025 to present, 5 months. That's January, February, March, April, May. 5 months. 14 pieces of enacted legislation. 14. 11 of them are joint resolutions of disapproval. That's fancy speak for there was a Biden regulation we didn't like, and we essentially repealed the regulation. There's S5, which was the Lake and Riley Act. There was the Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act, which was a nothing burger. It was like, we're going to keep spending like we're drunk. And then there was Ted Cruz's Take It Down Act, which was about like deep fakes that are, like porn deep fakes. 3 laws, guys. Three laws in Congress. That's what, just pick your representative if you can hear the sound of my voice. That's what they're doing. We need to be like the Bobs in Office Space and say, what would you say you do here? I got a column coming out on that because it is absolutely embarrassing. We've got B-list celebrities in Congress thinking that we want them to go and talk on Fox News. We want them to tweet aggressive, liberal-owning tweets. No, I want you to rein in government. I want you to codify the Doge cuts. I want you to do anything conservative. How about spend less? Maybe we can start. No. Nope. And that's my, if you want a quick take on the big, beautiful bill, just read the last line. The last line says, increase by $4 trillion. It's talking about the debt limit. I got a question for you, and if you can answer it, then I'll stand down on the big, beautiful bill. Why do you need to raise the debt limit $4 trillion if you're planning on reining in spending? Christian's been real patient, wants to talk about immigration and the mayor of Nashville. Christian, what you got?
Yes, it's just like this, young fella. I'm in my 70s. I'm a very starch believer in the Constitution of the United States of America.
Me too.
That is fucking made for American people here in the United States of America. It is not for China. It's not for other countries,
right,
etc.
It's
to
ours.
have their people to come in, have babies, and all of a sudden be a citizen.
Okay.
Excuse me. It is for people that are American citizens. This is where people take and don't read and study their Constitution. And they listen to every Tom, Dick, and Harry on their opinions and everything. I urge people to read the Constitution, believe what it says, and adhere to it. Then we'll be a lot better off. And the thing about it is the same thing they do with the Bible. Excuse me, I encourage people to take and read the 7th chapter of Matthew. Start about the 20th verse, and they want to take and proclaim to be a Christian. Read the whole thing thereafter, and then see what he says to people that does a little good here and a little good there and patting themselves on the back. He says to them, depart from me, I never knew you, workers of iniquity. Now, the thing about it is, like I said, a lot of people don't like to listen to me because I just take and speak straight out truth. Constitution is the law of the land.
It is.
The thing about it is, that is what we ought to be following. It ain't got nothing to do with human whatever. I feel for these people. But excuse me, I didn't put them there. My job as a citizen of the United States of America, if somebody's illegally in this country, I'm also as a law-bearing person here in America, if I know it, it's my job to take and call up the proper authorities and say, hey, there's people here that is illegally here.
How do you know, Christian? I got a question for you. This is an immigration law enforcement. How do you know when you're just out and about if someone's here illegally?
How do I know? I listen. I listen to them. I listen to what they say, etc. And I like to make this example to you, young fella. If I'm going through a school zone and the speed limit usually is between 15 and 25 miles an hour.
Sure.
And I'm going down through there and I think I don't feel like it's right. I need to go at least 50 miles an hour. Excuse me. I am still required to go by the law.
You are.
Whether I like it or not.
So what would
somebody
say that you would hear that you would be like, they're here without the proper documentation?
Well, I've heard different ones, young fella. And that's a good question that you're asking. I said, if I know, I'm saying
Okay.
if I know they're illegally and whatever, because you're around and about a lot.
Have
Like
you
I said,
have you
I'm
turned anyone over to immigration authorities?
No, because I don't get out much no more.
Okay.
But I do. I'm a great about the Constitution of the United States. People, I encourage them, read it, believe it.
Amen.
There's a lot of things that you might agree with or disagree with. And furthermore, people that is in office, like up there in Nashville right now, excuse me, the chief of police, sheriff, and all of them policemen, they shouldn't be taking adhering to what the mayor says up there, because their job, they took an oath to take and obey our laws. And whether we like them or not, it's
Hey.
our laws.
I agree with you on the rule of law. Thank you, Christian, for the call. I think that's right. We have the Constitution. We have the duly enacted laws of the United States. And that's where we are. And if we don't enforce that, now look, we have law enforcement officers. We have a process here. I think we got to be real careful on that. Well, hey, if people aren't here with status, we need to turn them in. Okay, but man, you better know, because we're in dangerous territory if you say, well, I heard somebody speaking Spanish. Well, look, there are a number of my friends who are citizens that switch between English and Spanish really fast.
I'm just saying, I speak some pretty good English whenever I go to, or Spanish when I go to Taco Bell, so I don't want to get caught up in the accident there.
We got to be real careful. And then if you're looking at somebody and the color of their skin and you're saying, I don't know if you need to be here, then you got a big problem. Like that, this is a legal status thing. It is not a race thing. It is not a language thing. It is, are you supposed to be here? Do you have legal status and authorization? And that's the question. So that's one thing to enforce, but just saying, I'm not sure whether you should be here because of what you hear or the way somebody looks. Got to be real careful there. We got to take a break. This is the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
through your door. When you buy a house,
More updates on the United JetBlue relationship. Also, a TSA incident that ends with multiple punches thrown. Those stories coming up at 10 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Short time on the first hour. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show. We've been talking about the immigration situation, particularly as it pertains to the situation here in Nashville. And I really thought on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. First of all, I try during the breaks to get to as many of y'all over there as I can, but there are a lot of y'all. Y'all are very active on this topic, so I apologize if I can't get to respond to your comment, but trust me, I'm seeing them. So, yes, I can see your texts, but I cannot get to all of them in the amount of time I have between a break and doing all the other stuff we got to do. 5645 said something really interesting. As a Christian, you, that's meaning me, that lives with other Christians who call this a Christian nation, shouldn't the laws reflect Christian teachings? Or is the religion of lawmakers just for show? And they quote Deuteronomy 10:18 through 19. It says, he defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourself were foreigners in Egypt. Fair take. Nothing I've said, nothing is inconsistent with loving foreigners in our country and treating them well. You can treat someone well even as you enforce the law. We seem to be, Democrats in particular, seem to struggle with this idea that law enforcement is wrong, that it's hurtful. And the column that I have over at the Tennessean that I urge you to go check out points out that no, actually selectively enforcing the law is hurtful. Just ask the families whose loved ones have been detained and deported, who are awaiting adjudication. Ask them whether they think that this is fair. Because it's not the enforcement that was the problem. It was actually the lack of enforcement. Because the law didn't change. We simply ignored it. Our leaders ignored it. And then we get this result. So if you're telling me that you care about the foreigner and the immigrant in our midst, which you should, treating them like this, where you're basically saying, hey, if you hide long enough, maybe. No, that is wrong. You need to say, hey, here's the deal. This is the way the law is. If you want to be here, let's do this right. And I won't go into all the bureaucratic details, but there are 5 and 10-year bars on reentry. We should look at those if we want people to be made right. You say, look, if you're here without legal status, please go back to your country of origin and try again. Right now, they will be legally advised, well, if you do that, you may not be able to come back in for 10 years. My point would be, if we have not enforced the immigration law and you have built a life here, should you have to go back and check in? Yeah. But do I really have a vested interest in, if you haven't broken the law, if you've done other than the immigration status, do I want to keep you out for 10 years? No, not really. And that's a little thing that we could do. It doesn't change the process in the law. It just says, hey, if you've violated the law, the penalties for violation, we could be civil. How about we do, okay, cool, here's a financial penalty. If you want to get rid of that bar, here's how much you have to pay. We can generate some revenue that way, pay for the whole system, pay for more enforcement. Okay, cool. Let's have a discussion about this. It really matters. We got 2 hours to go, and we are having fun. We're going to talk property taxes next. This is the Chris Hand Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
10 o'clock on the dot. I'm Jeff Malinoff with your top stories. Two big airlines, United and JetBlue, are planning to share customers. Details from ABC's Wayne Cabot.
United Airlines and JetBlue will offer flights on each other's websites. When you log on or use the app, you'll see both airlines. Prices will be set by the individual airline, they say. Also, customers can use their miles and loyalty benefits across both airlines. That includes priority boarding and access to preferred seats. United gets more access to flights across the Northeast. JetBlue customers gain access to international travel. It also means the return of United flights to JFK Airport, which ended years ago. Wayne Cabot, ABC News.
A Canadian citizen, 28-year-old Cameron McDougall, will be sentenced Friday after pleading guilty in federal court to assaulting TSA officers. McDougall first assaulted someone on a flight from Panama to Miami at the end of the last year. He was taken off the plane but not arrested and allowed to book on another airline. ABC's Victor Oquendo tells us what happened through the eyes of multiple security cameras.
He was back at Miami International Airport the next day as he passes through security and hides behind a wall. Several people pass him before he's seen punching a man walking by. Security tries to intervene. Then he storms back to the TSA checkpoint where security cameras catch him throwing several punches at TSA officers until he's knocked down over a luggage cart and pinned down until law enforcement arrives.
Once again, he will be sentenced today for those crimes. Ahead of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season, which runs from June through the end of November, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis spoke at a Home Depot in Palm Beach County this morning and urging residents to prepare for tropical storms. The governor also vowing to do more combat power outages during severe weather.
One of the things that we really work hard on in Florida is working with our utilities, not just the big private utilities like the Florida Power and Light, but also the municipalities, the rural co-ops, everything to pre-stage as many resources as possible so that when the storm passes, people can work to have a rapid power restoration.
Real quick money news right now as everything is still pointing downwards. Dow is down 11, S&P down 12, and NASDAQ down 40. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Jeff Malinoff, WTN News.
I swear this one sounds like Enya. It sounds like Enya. I want to sail away. Sail away, sail away. I could see it. I don't know if y'all know this, but Wasted Bacon, the AI band that I've built with Matt Murphy, the album's done. I just have to publish it. We have such great songs as Throat Coat, song about Dan Mandis. Voices on the Line, it's about you guys. And even Swamp Ass, about summer in the South. But we actually have a serious topic that I want to get to right now. We have a treat. The mayor of Nolanville, Haley Galick, is joining us to talk about property taxes. In Middle Tennessee, this has been a very serious conversation, most directly around Nashville, and Mayor O'Connell talking about property tax needs in Davidson County. That's happening in Williamson County because we've had our new round of property assessments. And then various municipalities, like the town of Nolensville, are trying to figure out, well, what revenues do we need based on these new assessments to pay for what we want? And so I want to have that conversation. Mayor, how you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, I want to say it is truly a pleasure to have a public official, one, that does not actively seek out media opportunities so that they can talk about themselves, but understands that this is an important topic and is willing to do it. So thank you very much for that. Talk to me a little bit about, for the listeners who kind of heard this stuff, they've seen it on Facebook, they've seen it in different places. Where are we in the process right now? What's going on at the county and town level? And, what does it really mean?
Well, we're kind of in the middle of the process. We will have, we're expected to have second reading of the budget in early June. We had first reading in May and then a public hearing. Last night, we had something kind of different for Nolensville. We had a town hall Q&A. It was an open format where people could ask questions, and then the board and staff were there to answer questions. First reading of the budget went through with a 55-cent property tax, which is a change for Nolensville. Nolensville has gone through a lot of growth, not just in the number of people that we have, but also in 2021, the town started a fire department.
Right. I remember that.
I think you remember prior to 2021, we had a fully volunteer fire department. The town put some money in funding the volunteer fire department, but it really was considered a county responsibility. My belief has always been that the charter change that went through, that changed from a mayor aldermanic system to city manager commission form of government, really was a referendum on public safety. I think the community feels very strongly about public safety. But with the fire department comes some challenging costs.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. The fire stuff is not cheap. I have a brother-in-law who's a Franklin fireman, and I'm glad that they invest in the safety gear and things to keep those guys safe while they're keeping us safe. The question I would have for you in the town of Nolensville is, I believe it's still code that new buildings have basically a sprinkler system in them. How does that sort of put downward pressure on the demand for fire services?
Well, so commercial buildings all have sprinkler systems. So that's not special for Nolensville. But what is more special for Nolensville is residential fire suppression systems.
Right.
So that has been in place for a long time. I think it has put pressure to slow public safety specifically for fire, but firefighters do more than just fight fires. They respond, the majority of their calls are actually medically related.
Right.
So I think that's a component of it, but I think that there's more to it than that.
So we've got fire. Obviously, as population grow in all these areas, not just town of Nolensville, we need more police officers to cover, different areas. Like I understand that. Why is that not covered by the broader tax base and requires a increase in the rate?
So that's a great question. There's two main funding sources that fund our general operations. One is going to be property tax, and the other is going to be sales tax. So the current fiscal year budget, property tax and sales tax are about equal. And the operating budget for the fire department is around $2 million. The operating budget for the police department is around $2.2 million in the current fiscal year.
Sure.
When we look at sales tax growth over the last year, the state of Tennessee projected 0.5% growth in sales tax, and we projected 1%. We probably overshot it a little bit. We've had a little bit less than the 1%. And I think the next question would be, well, what about some of the larger developments like the Publix development? And that will come online towards the end of the year, around October. And we are factoring in the projected sales tax from that specific development into the models that town staff have put together. The challenge has become the growth of the fire department and how it's funded. So in 2021, it was 2020. In 2020, when there was a property tax increase from 14 cents to 29 cents. And that was done at the time, that predates me being on the board, to start the fire department. Well, that property tax increase to create a new department generated around $700,000 in revenue.
Sure.
Well, the first operating budget for the fire department was over $1.4 million.
Those don't match up.
They do not. And I think that, everybody makes decisions with what they have at the time. I think that they had hoped that the revenue that was generated from that increase would have funded the department, but it did not. It did not cover the debt service for the fire station. And we've also looked at, we've instituted a fire impact fee that would be applied to new development, but it doesn't cover the full operation of a department. It's only legally allowed to cover the impacts for new development.
Well, how do you deal with the fact that not all of these communities around Nashville's a different animal, right? The city of Nashville has its own industry. It's got commerce. It's got everything, right? And then you look around and you say, okay, well, Franklin and Brentwood, they're right off 65, for example. So they're right there. You've got the mall. You've got downtown Franklin. You've got all these areas that are relatively easy to get to. And then you get to something like the town of Nolanville, which I love. I don't mind getting stuck behind a tractor every now and then. I actually love that about Nolanville. But we're close enough to a lot of things, but we're not really a main thoroughfare for folks that might be going to and from work in Nashville. We're more of a bedroom community. How do you look at that? And folks look at Brentwood and say, hey, we want to be like that. But the truth is, we're in a different geographic location. We have different dynamics. How do y'all figure that sort of thing in when you budget?
Well, I've been saying that for years, that we are never going to have an interstate running through the heart of town, and we don't want that. I mean, it's not on the table, but even if it was, it's not something that the community wants.
Right.
And so all of the businesses know their business far better than the government, and they have specific criteria that they look for locating. And there are average daily traffic counts. There's so many criteria that go into it. So there's some businesses that we will never have. I know for Brentwood, I think Costco is a big sales tax driver. We will never have a Costco in Nolanville, or it's highly unlikely. When you look at the Publix development, that development, we're projecting around $450,000 of sales tax revenue. That doesn't fund all of the police officers that would be asked for in this upcoming budget. And when you look at, I think the question that also has to be answered is, do we have too many firefighters or too many police officers? And I know that that's not the case. On any given shift, we have 5 firefighters on shift, and we have 3 police officers. That doesn't account if we have people out on sick leave or if we've got, a vacation, which people take. So we have a maximum amount of that. We have a ladder truck, and I think a lot of people, to operate the fire department apparatus, the engine and the ladder truck takes 3 firefighters per engine. Right. So we've got a ladder truck to be able to get to taller buildings or some of the taller houses. we can't take that apparatus out if we don't have the staffing in order.
Right. Having a big, beautiful fire engine doesn't do you a lot of good if you don't have people that can operate it.
And it is true that we have to be cautious about how quickly different departments grow, and we have that conversation every year. But we also have pressure in the community to make sure that if you call 911, we are showing up quickly. And it hasn't been until we had the full-time fire department that our firefighters could respond to medical calls.
So what's the percent? What is the percentage increase that's on the table? Like, you know, it's a lot, but what is it's 29 to 55 cent?
Well, it becomes more complicated because of the reappraisal. So the current property tax rate is 29 cents, but Tennessee is a revenue neutral state. And so when the reappraisal happens, there's a new certified tax rate that is given.
Right.
And so that certified tax rate ensures that just because your house goes up in value, that
your taxes don't go up.
Right. So the new certified tax rate is just under 19 cents.
Okay. And then we're going to raise it to what? Or that's what's on the table?
What was passed on first reading is 55 cents. I am trying to get some of the commissioners to, and talked about it last night, to consider a less aggressive increase. What our staff has done a great job of is projecting out the next 5 years. And what we haven't talked about yet is road projects. And that is really what is hurting. Public safety is expensive, but also figuring out how we're going to pay for road projects is something that all Middle Tennessee communities are really struggling with.
Yeah, but how do you balance the demands for, hey, I want somebody there when there's an emergency, with a pretty conservative community that's saying, man, I'm working out the math right now. That is a absolutely massive rate hike. Like, how do you balance that?
Well, I think you balance it by talking to a lot of people, which I think everyone on our board takes very seriously, talking to as many people as possible to get input. What I've heard from the board is that everyone understands that we do need the police and firefighters to be on staff. I do hope that they will consider, now that the certified tax rate is out, pulling back. There's assumptions in every model.
Sure.
And I think that we have looked closely to try to have as much clarity as possible. The 55 cents was to fund a 5-year plan, and I think that that's too far out. But I also see the wisdom in trying to make sure that we're looking down the road. It's been challenging right now, and I think that one thing that I'm really proud of is that we are making sure that we have opportunities for people to ask questions in a conversational style, so that we can provide information we have, because ultimately it's the community's decision.
Sure. Well, I think at the end of the day, the big thing for me is most folks, I know this and you know this, aren't going to go read the details of the budget. I've jumped into the town's budget, and it's won awards and all of these things, but I mean, just to be blunt, I just want the summary. I want to know the cost drivers. I want to know the things that have changed materially that are justifying such a radical tax increase. And if the justification's there, all right, we can have that conversation. And if it's not, then I would rather, keep my money. I mean, I was kind of playing with the property tax things and realizing, hey, this is going to be several $1,000s more for me on our house. And I think it's important to have a calm, level head when we talk about these things, because look, I don't like taxes. I don't like them at all. But taxes are part of, living in a town with a government, with public services. You want the services, you got to pay for them. That's frankly the problem we have in Washington right now, is we have lots of things we want and we don't want to pay for any of it. So I get the rock and a hard place that y'all are between. Is there anything else as we kind of wind out this segment that you want folks in Nolanville, folks in Williamson County, folks in the Nashville Metro audience to kind of know about this process, or things they should check out and consider?
I would encourage people to look at the property tax calculator that is on Williamson County's website. You can put in tax rate, you can put in the appraised value of your home. According to the property assessor's data that they released when everyone got their tax appraisal notice, the average house in Nolanville is around $800,000 in value. So for an $800,000 house at the 55-cent mark, the annual estimated taxes is $1,100. So I'm still hopeful that the board will consider a lesser amount, and it is the board decision as a whole. But the total amount that the average house in Nolanville is paying annually is, even at the 55 cents, is $1,100
for the town portion, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you've got
And
town and county that layer together to give you a higher rate or a higher amount, right?
Right. So Williamson County's taxes go to pay for all the county services, also for schools. The certified tax rate for Williamson County also changed. And I don't want to play in their sandbox because I do town stuff and not county stuff.
Sure, I understand that.
But my understanding is that they are looking at lowering, I think, around I hate to give a number, but in their budget committee, they've in public meetings, they've said, I think, around $1.34. So those numbers would change from what they are now. And if you, on the property assessor's website, I mean, as of right now, you've got Fairview at 87 cents. You've got Brentwood at 29 cents, although I think they have voted to lower theirs. Spring Hill at 73 cents, and they're staying there. Interestingly, at Thompson Station, no police and fire department.
Right. My parents live in
that,
Thompson Station, so I know that.
So there's a lot of variability in the different services, but there's certainly a cost for those services. So I appreciate questions, and I'm always happy to talk about the town.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Mayor. Thank you very much, and hopefully we can talk soon about this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, bye-bye. So, folks, here's the deal. Conservatives don't like property taxes. They don't like any taxes. I don't like any taxes. I think it's an obligation we have to look at it and say, okay, is this giving me what I'm paying for? And if the answer is no, then we shouldn't do it, because a lot of stuff gets buried in town budgets, city budgets, county budgets, and nobody looks at it. They just keep paying. And then at some point we have to say, wait a minute, what are you guys doing? And if it's police, I'll tell you what, the police department in the town of Nolanville is excellent. We're a foster family, and we've had some children come through our home that have been a little wild, and they have been kind and wonderful, particularly Officer Pickle. Boys are a huge fan of Officer Pickle. They went to police camp, and I'll just say that the public service folks in Nolanville are excellent. I think the issue here is, are we planning in a way that makes sense? Are we going to look at the community as it exists? Because I'm telling you, Nolensville and Brentwood and Franklin and all these other in Nashville are all very different. So comparing the rates between the two or three or however many is kind of dangerous, because there's different revenue streams that we need to think about. We also need to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
More news from the Diddy trial after a disturbing testimony by a personal assistant has become public. Also, the future of Elon Musk in the White House after he is leaving Doge. All that coming up at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
We're coming back. I wanted to take a little time, but we're going to have to jump to a break pretty quick. Larry, I see you over there. I'll get to you in a minute on the other side of the break. The property tax discussion is always a tough one, and I appreciate all the comments on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. The big challenge here is because all of the municipalities are not created equally, you have a different revenue stream rates. Like, for example, if a community's off 65, they may have more sales tax revenue, but their revenue from property taxes might be different. Where Nolanville is located, it's nestled kind of between 24 and 65. It's kind of in the middle of, I don't want to say nowhere because it's not actually that far out, but it's not a direct shot for a lot of folks. And so that means that some of the commercial tax revenues aren't as high and probably won't be. And so the devil is in the details on all of this stuff. But when you look at some of those rates, I hope that the mayor in Nolanville is able to convince folks that going from a adjusted 19 cents to 55 cents would probably not go over real well. That's what, 180% increase. And I understand it was 29 to 55. It's a lot of math, but the point is it's a lot. And if you're going to pay a lot more, let's make sure we're getting a lot more. And when it comes to government stuff, you just get leakage. It's real hard to run it efficiently because it doesn't go out of business. If it's inefficient, nobody loses their job. I mean, maybe some officials do, but the federal government's been really inefficient, lost a ton, and most people have kept their jobs. We haven't really done anything to rein them in. So we should consider that, but we also got to take another break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is Super Talk 99.7.
It's 10:30. I'm Jeff Malinoff with your top stories. Graphic and disturbing testimony Thursday in the Sean Diddy. It's 10:30. I'm Jeff Malinoff with your top stories. Graphic and disturbing testimony Thursday in the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking and racketeering trial in Manhattan. The accused music mogul's former personal assistant testified under the pseudonym Maya. ABC's Aaron Katursky listened to her testimony.
Mia's going to be back on the witness stand. She has already recounted several instances of violence and violent sexual assault. Perhaps there's more to come. And then she's going to be cross-examined. We expect that would take much of the day because the defense is going to try and say that she was in a professional relationship with Sean Combs for 8 years. She had points where maybe there were red flags. She said the first day she met Sean Combs, he was in his underwear. And why did she stay in that professional relationship for so long?
Moving on to the White House, Elon Musk is done as a special government employee spearheading Doge's efforts to cut government spending. However, he may be involved in the future, just sporadically. ABC's Rachel Scott reporting from the White House.
We're told that senior officials here at the White House were disappointed by comments from Elon Musk saying that he was disappointed in the president's spending bill, that it would increase the deficit and undermine the work of Doge. The White House insists that Musk did leave on good terms. I'm told that he will continue to serve as an unofficial advisor to the president, even possibly attending meetings here at the White House in the future.
News in Ohio after a routine traffic stop turned suddenly violent, ending in gunfire. 2 officers are down. Thankfully, they are now in stable condition. ABC's Pierre Thomas tells us what happened.
The officers in Columbus, Ohio, approached the vehicle just before 7 p.m. Wednesday when the passenger jumps out and takes off. There's a chase. Then that passenger opens fire, hitting both officers. That passenger identified as 21-year-old Devontae Dixon. He's now facing charges of attempted murder and felony assault. Police calling on the public for help. Authorities say the driver was taken into custody, was cooperative, and later released.
That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Jeff Malinoff, WTN News.
If you're dealing with relentless back pain, sciatica, neck pain, or arm pain, and you've already tried injections, physical therapy, or medications, you're not alone. And no, surgery is not your only option. At the Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain, we've created a smarter, more effective solution that goes beyond traditional non-surgical spinal decompression. While decompression is a piece of the puzzle, it's far from the whole picture. We combine advanced diagnostics, state-of-the-art technology, and custom-tailored therapies to get real results. Results that last. Our approach isn't cookie cutter. It's comprehensive and built specifically for your body and your healing. And here's our promise. If you don't feel a reduction in pain after your first visit, that visit is on us. It's that simple. Relief is possible. Call 615-882-4838 today. And for just $49, let us show you the difference. Call now, 615-882-4838, and find out what real healing feels like. That's 615-882-4838.
Hey, folks, it's Mark from the Safe House. I have a question for you. Am I the only person pissed off with the mainstream fake news, liberal judges,
and whiny politicians
who don't realize why Donald Trump is president, and fake safes? And you may wonder, why fake safes?
Why, Mark?
Fake safes are like Joe Biden, cheap and ineffective. A real safe from the Safe House is like Donald Trump, tough, effective, and provides peace of mind when you need it most. So drop by the Safe House, check out the largest selection of safes in the Southeast, and see what a real safe looks like. So go to NashvilleSafehouse.com. That's NashvilleSafehouse.com.
With summer break coming up for teachers, Efficient HVAC wants to show appreciation with a summer special for teachers. Get 10% off maintenance or repair work this summer from Efficient HVAC. Go to efficienthvac.net. That's efficienthvac.net.
Warmer weather for the weekend. I'm WSMV4 First Alert meteorologist Stefano DiPietro, but keep the umbrella handy today for a few showers, even a passing thunderstorm this afternoon. Highs are in the 70s for today. Rain tapers off this evening and overnight tonight, down to the 50s tomorrow.
Kind of makes me want to dance. It does. Welcome back to the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith filling in. We've been talking property taxes, which seems to be a relevant topic to pretty much everybody in Middle Tennessee. And we had the mayor of Nolanville on to kind of explain some of the basics, answer some questions. And ultimately, this is just a balancing test. Are you getting the government that you pay for? Everybody wants goodies. Nobody wants to pay for the goodies. I get that. I understand how it works. But we gotta figure out that balance and hold our leaders accountable. Seems fair to me. Larry, what you got, man?
Hey, Cameron, thanks for taking my call. And first of all, I hope you and your boys enjoyed your gift.
We did. We've been having a good time, man. Thank you.
Well, I hope you remind Matt every day, But,
I do.
Well, all right, thank you. On the property taxes. First of all, the last year I was in Nastyville in Westmead, my property taxes were $6,500 a year.
Ooh.
Yeah. They're now $1,200 where I live now. But my next door neighbor, who was 94 years old, her house had been paid for since 1970. Her property taxes got so expensive that she had to she had to sell her place and move into assisted living.
Which I hate. That makes me so mad when you get somebody who is property rich and cash poor, and the property taxes force them to make changes. That to me, we need to, folks like that, there needs to be a better mechanism for relief.
Yes, there does. I mean, she walked 3 miles every day. She still drove. She still sang in her church every Sunday. And to see, Mayor Eyebrow, first of all, raised the property taxes by 27%, okay? And then, Mayor Freddie is now wanting a 40-something% increase. And I'm still in touch with my ex, okay? Her property value went up 57% last year, but her property taxes went up 75%.
Wow.
And now they're about to raise it again.
Well, government doesn't stop eating, Larry. I mean, once it goes, it goes.
Well, and, and I'm so glad I'm not living in Nastyville anymore, but, if you called Metro on the non-emergency number, well, hell, even if you called them on the 911 number, you'd be on hold. But if you called them on the non-emergency number, it'd be 3 or 4 hours before an officer could get there because Nashville is 250-something policemen short.
Yeah.
So all of these people are leaving Nastyville and moving to Nolanville. And I remember when Nolanville was just a wide spot in the road.
Me too.
And I just, there's got to be some accountability.
Well, Larry, I appreciate the call, man. You be well, okay?
I will, sir. And listen, the offer's still open for you and your sons to come here and learn how to drive a tractor.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for the call. So, Larry's right. I mean, this stuff kind of keeps going. And let me tell you I'll tell you a quick little story. So I'm one of the OGs. I grew up here. Was born in Memphis, raised in Brentwood. And I went to Brentwood Academy. I saw this whole area develop. And I can tell you one of the funniest stories of what happened with Cool Springs Mall. I know malls aren't what they used to be, but Brentwood had real strict regulations on signage and all that stuff because, Brentwood is like Little Kingdom. Well, Franklin said, we wouldn't mind having those taxes. So Brentwood got all the traffic for the Cool Springs Galleria without a lot of the tax base. And so it's kind of, you got to think through some of these things because you never know how it's ultimately all going to shake out. And you got to be smart. And what I've realized with governments is a lot of our public officials are trying to do the best they can with what they got. But in Nashville, and I want to be real clear about this. I had an editorial board meeting, talked to Mayor O'Connell about this. A lot of the COVID funding, remember when we were throwing money out the door? Just kind of setting it on fire. Everybody got checks, COVID checks. Well, what happened is you had municipalities like Nashville that expanded and grew because, hey, free money. And then that money dries up. And then the Trump administration comes in and DOJ is like, we're going to cut some of this stuff, some of these grants, some of this funding to Vanderbilt and other places like that. And then the city of Nashville had to look and say, wait a minute, where's all the money? Oh, well, we want to keep this stuff. Well, if you want to keep the goodies, you got to pay for them. And that's a lot of what happened here is city of Nashville, instead of saying, nope, we got free money from the government, free money's gone, so are the goodies. It's, well, we just have to pay for it. No, you don't. No, you don't. I want to be real clear about this. Financial decisions are a choice. You can start with $0 and figure out what you're going to spend. The federal government could do that today. Oh, well, Cameron, they spend trillions of dollars. You can't possibly. That's the problem. When you're spending trillions of dollars and billions of dollars, it's really easy to hide a lot of garbage because it's just a line. I was looking at the big, beautiful bill, and there were $75 million worth of anti-lock brakes for some military vehicles. And I'm wondering, why don't we just phase out those vehicles over time and that's a lot of anti-lock brakes. 0473 said, what goodies are you talking about? The goodies I'm talking about are the goodies that come from government spending. That's a lot of government contracts. Let's be honest. Anytime you take borrowed money and or tax revenue, you're redistributing it. It doesn't vanish. 0473 said, there are no goodies. Okay, then we need no taxes. A goodie is public servants like fire and police. Some municipalities don't have them. They're relying on the county or they're relying on, and they know what that means. That means if you got a problem, help ain't coming real fast. Some people say, well, I won't help to come fast. So we should socialize those costs and we should tax everybody, and that's what we need. And there's choices. But they're lying to you when they say they have to. There is no have to. There's a choice to. And everybody's the same way. There's no difference between the mayor of Nolanville, the county commission, the state legislature, the folks in Washington. It's all the same. You choose to. Oh, we must. Here's a great question. Again, I keep going back to the big, beautiful bill because I don't understand why Republicans always have to let me down on spending. Well, we need this money to enforce immigration law. Well, hang on a minute. On the existing revenues, you have radically curtailed illegal immigration. Why can't we keep doing that? Oh, well, we need to, invest in this and it's a priority. Okay, cool. But we're doing better with what we had. Why do we have to spend more? And nobody has a good answer. It's because we don't ask tough questions. We just look to the other guy and say, well, have y'all seen Joe Biden? Have you seen Nancy Pelosi? Well, Joe Biden's not the president. Nancy Pelosi is not the speaker. And you didn't get to vote for them. What about the people you did vote for? How'd they vote? They vote to rein in spending, rein in the federal government, not put your kids and grandkids in generational debt? Or did they tell you they just had to keep on spending? Well, you and I both know the answer. Now what are we going to do about it? We'll talk about that a little bit more on the other side of the break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
President Trump and Harvard continuing its war of words. New questions also now about government oversight of the cryptocurrency. And hurricane season, it officially begins this weekend. We'll have those stories and more coming up at 11 a.m. on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Man, time flies when you're having fun. Welcome back to the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith. Y'all are getting wild over on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. 3304 says the biggest ripoff in property taxes to me is the reassessment. It's fair. You should not penalize someone for improving their property. You should pay on your value at the time of purchase, reassessed only when sold or inherited. That's an interesting take. Respect that. Alan says, accountability in government will never happen. What's that old saying? Wish in one hand, crap in the other, see which one fills up first. Alan, you should not crap in your hands. Just don't do that, bro. That's not a good one. 2531 says, we all need a dose of tough love and start living within our means. Yeah, I agree. Only difference in local state taxing and state and federal taxing is that I can get the cat signed off on a tax or expenditure on the phone in about 30 minutes. I could no more discuss issues with Blackburn Haggerty or the newly moneyed Ogles if my life depended on it. Yeah, that is one of the tough things about what's happened in Congress. It's tough to get folks on the line. Like, it truly is. You'll get their staff. You'll get an auto pen. I mean, look, I worked in a congressional office. I can tell you exactly how this works. Every one of them has a CRM, a constituent resource manager, that's approved by the House. Your emails and phone calls are in and logged. And then they look at it and say, okay, what topics are people writing about? And you get a form letter signed with an auto pen. That's not always the case. When I was doing that, I like to call folks. I thought that was nice because I knew if I was a constituent, I wouldn't really want a form letter. I would want to talk to people. So I would call constituents for the politicians I work for. And people seem to appreciate that. But it's tough. To really hold those folks accountable because they like to rub elbows with the powerful. They want to go to events with big campaign donors. They want to, and most of us, we don't fit that description. And so occasionally you'll get one that genuinely cares. I'll say the mayor of Nolanville, she doesn't love doing this kind of stuff. She was a little bit concerned. I'll just be honest about it. But she was willing. She didn't seek it out. And that's a good sign. That's the kind of politician you want. You want a normal human who isn't really into all this, but is kind of nerding out on the details and wants to figure it out. I'll take that all day long over the B-list celebrity that loves the spotlight, wants to be out there, and just makes weird statements, that's looking for some kind of messaging bill. Congress doesn't do anything. These messaging bills are all over the place. I watched an interview with Andy Ogles the other day about his bill to amend the Constitution to allow Trump a third term in office. And this was on, I don't know, it was Fox News or something that was conservative. And the person, well, what have you done about it? What are the prospects? Well, he's like, well, it's really tough. Have you really? Well, we're not really pushing it. Well, okay, because it's a show pony bill. Chuck says, John Rose's staff has called me on almost every email I've sent. That matters, Chuck. I bet it matters to you. It's a big deal. Contrast, Jason said, I emailed Mark Green. It'll be 2 years in November, and I never heard a thing back from him. So it matters, right? It's constituent services. If there's one thing that members of Congress need to do right now, its constituent services because they're surely not legislating. They're just not doing it. Steve said the late Senator Fred Thompson once said politics is show business for ugly people. That's fair. I can respect that. I get it, guys. But if we don't hold them accountable and frankly toss some of these folks out of office, then we're just going to keep getting the same stuff. They're not doing anything. They're not legislating. They're not leading. They're not even doing the things that would make some of the Trump executive orders permanent. That's the one that bothers me. Let's just say hypothetically that the American people looked at the agenda and said, hey, what Trump is putting on the table is what we want to vote for. Because that's what happened. And then we get in here and Doge does its thing and Trump's issuing executive. It's sort of like Government by Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, where it says I can do what I want. The problem for Trump is that that's not how our system's set up. That you can't just make up executive orders. You have to have congressional authority. That's where he's going to get in trouble with these tariffs. Regardless of what you think about tariffs, we can argue about over that policy. What is really going to be the issue here is there actually an emergency? Maybe you guys can tell me what the emergency is. Because if you can't, then I'm betting the courts are going to say there's not an emergency, so you can't do all this tariff stuff. So while we take a break, you tell me what is the emergency that legally justifies the tariffs. If you guys can tell me that, we'll talk about it on the other side. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Good morning. It is 11 a.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. We'll have a complete weather forecast here in a couple of minutes. President Trump has accused Harvard of, quote, treating the country with great disrespect, suggesting the university should stop fighting his policies. ABC's Selena Wang has the latest.
Thousands of international students are still in limbo.
We know that this is going to be a long legal battle.
And now a dramatic new escalation that could impact universities across the country. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announcing the U.S. will work to aggressively revoke visas of Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields.
New questions about government oversight of the cryptocurrency after the world's largest crypto exchange began listing a cryptocurrency started by Trump's family. Here's ABC's Aaron Katursky.
It's the latest sign that the Trump administration is turning away from crypto enforcement, and it happens to coincide with a benefit to the Trump family. The Securities and Exchange Commission dropping its lawsuit against Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange, ending one of the last remaining crypto enforcement actions from the prior administration, which had accused Binance of mishandling customer money and other violations.
Well, ahead of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season, which begins this weekend on June 1 and ends in November, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he spoke at a Home Depot in Palm Beach County. That was early this morning, and he's urging residents to get ready for these tropical storms and hurricanes. The governor also vowing to do more to combat power outages during severe weather.
One of the things that we really work hard on in Florida is working with our utilities, not just the big private utilities like the Florida Power and Light, but also the municipalities, the rural co-ops, everything to pre-stage as many resources as possible so that when the storm passes, people can work to have a rapid power restoration.
That is the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
Welcome back. We only have an hour left, less than that. We have been going and having fun. 0094 told me that he was not listening. 0095, sorry. Not going to listen again till Monday. But then he got bored and wanted to see what other BS I was spewing. So legal BS, apparently. The issue that I brought up before the break was tell me what the national emergency is that justified the tariffs. Because under the law, we want to follow the law, right? Like we're talking about enforcing immigration law. We need to follow the law as enacted by Congress. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act is what Trump's using for the tariffs. And I ask you guys, well, what was the emergency or what emergency justifies the use of this law? Because otherwise, if you want to impose a tariff, you got to go to Congress and do that. So let's see what you guys came up with. First, I did see Larry's comment that he was having issues and with Social Security and Medicare, and he called Mark Green's office and got a call from his staff, and it was settled within a week. So he really helped out. So I want to be sure to share that with you guys. You said $32 trillion in debt is an emergency. I would argue that it's terrible, but if it was an emergency, we would have done something about it. And I don't know if you noticed, but we haven't. We've only added to it. So, I mean, it's really hard to say something is emergency when you're not doing anything to reverse it. So, okay. A swampy national defense system that starts wars for profit around the world. It's an emergency. Cool. Not what Trump said, but okay. Alan says, everything we buy that says made in China has enabled our primary adversary on earth to build a military that's rapidly approaching the capacity to rival us. I'd call that an emergency. Mike says maybe it's the national debt. Steve says the emergency is that American companies can't compete with countries such as China. I would just argue that's just false. We have the second largest manufacturing economy in the world. Behind China, I get that. But we're the largest service economy in the world. We're also the largest consumer of goods and services. So we are the juggernaut. That the idea that America is just no longer an economic powerhouse is just false. That's just made up political garbage. No, you don't have to go to Congress to impose tariffs. The president has the authority to impose tariffs. This has already been established this past week by lawmakers. We're getting screwed by the rest of the world. That's the emergency. And we've had enough. No, the law is that there has to be an emergency. And here's what the executive order says, because I think that's important to read. Find that underlying conditions, including a lack of reciprocity in our bilateral trade relationships, disparate tariff rates and non-tariff barriers, suppress domestic wages and consumption. Again, we're the largest consumer in the world of goods and services, so I don't understand that one. Constitute unusual and extraordinary threat to national security and the economy. And it's basically, well, we have a trade deficit. Well, here's the problem, is that we've had trade deficits, and I've talked to you guys on different shows and in writing as to why if I buy something from you and give you money and you give me stuff, then I haven't lost my money. Like, the trade deficits are not like the national debt. It doesn't work that way. But the problem for Trump in this is that we've had trade deficits and it was an emergency. And we now have to say it is an emergency for Trump to have the authority. And here's the thing that I hate about some of these laws. I don't think anybody can seriously argue that Congress is the responsible entity. Constitutionally, we like the Constitution. The laws come from Congress. They don't come from the executive branch. That's what the Constitution says. The legislative power is with the Congress. It is not with the executive branch. The executive branch's job is to make sure the laws are faithfully executed. So Patrick says, well, Congress didn't stop the invasion of our country with illegals. I consider that to be an emergency, but nothing was done until Trump elected. That's very true, Patrick. Also very different, because Trump is following the law. Trump's enforcing the law as it is written. And so he's doing what his predecessors, frankly, did not do. They did not do that. John in Lawrenceburg says, I guess an emergency for imposing tariffs is in the eye of the beholder. Sounds ambiguous to me. John, I think that's the problem. Because the bottom line is that Congress, this is congressional authority, like unmistakable from the Constitution to do this. So they're delegating authority. They're saying, okay, in these special emergency situations, the president can do it. Well, President Trump said, well, we have an emergency. Well, now we're in a legal battle over, is it a real emergency or not? Chuck said the emergency that Congress has relinquished its duty. Amen, Chuck. Chuck's wholly accurate here. Again, let's not argue over the tariff policy right now. Let's argue over whether it's okay for Trump to do this, because I would argue if Trump saying it's an emergency and he can basically impose tariffs, do whatever he wants, then why can't Joe Biden? Why can't any other president? And the answer is they can. And this is what surprised the left, is they're like, wait a minute. Trump's using these powers in ways we did not anticipate. And the problem, if you don't like the uniparty, you don't like all this stuff, then the idea of the executive branch running amok should bother you, no matter who's in charge. Now, the answer here needs to be, if you love tariffs, that Congress enacts the tariffs. Republicans in the House and the Senate say, Trump, we see your tariffs. We're going to enact them. This is what we're going to do. That's the right answer. But Congress doesn't do anything. So Trump's going to do this. And either the courts are going to say there is not an emergency, so you can't do it, in which case all the tariffs imposed, fees collected, everything have to go back. All the policies that have been built on revenues from those tariffs now don't make as much economic sense. And it's because Trump's saying, I'm fed up with you guys. I want to do it on my own. I don't blame him for wanting to do that. You know what? Every president tries this. Obama tried it. Biden tried it. Remember his student loan debt forgiveness thing? He's like, I have a legal authority to do this. No, you don't. Obama got rolled by the Supreme Court like 23 times. So the bottom line here is, if you say anything, a president can unilaterally declare an emergency for any purpose, and there's no check on that, the courts can't review that and see if it's consistent with statute, then we have rule by the executive and we have a king. And I don't care whether you love Trump or hate Trump, love Biden or hate Biden, we should not have a king. We should have a tension between the branches of government. And right now, there is no tension from Congress because Congress wants to do nothing. They want to tweet and go on the news shows. They're lazy. They're just doing nothing. They're clapping. Just take all of Congress, not just the Republicans. They're clapping or booing for the incumbent of the White House. Oh, I like them. They're good. Yay. Or they're bad. Boo. But they're still not doing anything. Darren says, Biden and the school loans is a completely different situation. Apples and oranges, dude. I disagree, Darren. I disagree. Because Biden outstripped his authority. He got bounced by the courts because he did not have the power as given by Congress to do the thing he wanted to do. What's happening to Trump right now is he's being sued by small businesses. These aren't some radical liberal organizations. They're impacted by the tariffs, and they're saying, you don't have authority to do this. That's the legal argument. The Constitution gives this power to the Congress. You don't have the power because the thing you're saying is an emergency is not actually an emergency, and therefore these tariffs are unconstitutional. I think we want folks to make constitutional arguments and try to uphold the Constitution, right? So if Trump does indeed have the constitutional authority, then sweet, he can do it. But I think we keep going back to the same point of Congress has to, at some point, do something, right? Codify the things that Trump's doing. Take his executive orders and say, you know what? We like this executive order. We want it to be permanent so that when the next executive who isn't conservative, who isn't a Republican, comes through, then it can't be undone. And that's it. Yeah, guys, I think that y'all, unfortunately, people have lied to you. You can literally read Trump's executive order because he cites the law, right? The International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the National Emergencies Act, Section 604 of the Trade Act of 1974. He's making his legal argument. He's supposed to do that, right? So did Biden. So did every president beforehand. You can't just write a note and say, I can do what I want. That's not how this works. So he's made the argument. Now he's got to defend it in court. That's normal. That's the check. Nick says, so what you're saying is that countries can tariff us, and if Congress doesn't act, then there's nothing the president can do. Well, yeah. Absent a national emergency. If we're in a war, for example, or something that is an anomaly, something that's different, and he can jump in there and do some of this stuff. I would even argue that he might be able to do some very narrow, tailored tariffs. So like tariffs against China. Something like that. Chuck makes a point. He says, for an emergency, facts should show an imminent threat or actual damage that must be addressed. Yeah, I think that's fair. And during one of the breaks, I'll see if I can find the definition in the law. But the bottom line is, it's going to be a judicial determination. It's going to be, does the grant of authority from Congress match Trump's argument? And if the argument, as in the executive order, I think it mentions fentanyl and immigration and other stuff, well, those are unrelated to tariffs. I mean, those are illegal activities. There's no, with tariffing fentanyl, if we know it's coming into the country, you guys can obviously see how that's kind of weird. 4231 says, but no matter what Trump wants to do, the leftist judges will stop him, even if it is legitimate. So this is one of the cool things about the legal process in the United States. We have the right of appeal, and you at least get one layer, right? So Trump loses at the trade court on tariffs, appeals to the circuit court, and that stayed. It's not overruled. It's stayed, meaning the tariffs can stay in place while the legal process plays out. And then obviously you got an appeal to the Supreme Court. I think one of the big examples of activist judges are the national injunctions from one federal district court somewhere in the United States. I think the Supreme Court has and ultimately will, I should say, they must, and I think they will address the issue of those national injunctions. That, it is a district court has jurisdiction over a limited space. And it is related to the plaintiffs in that case and in, that jurisdiction for that court. I think that's going to happen. I think it probably should happen because the idea that a district judge in California who doesn't like a Trump thing can just freeze it nationwide seems like a problem. Mike says, we are in a war. It's a trade war, yes, but a war nonetheless. I mean, kind of because we started it in the sense of, who cares who started it? If it's China and they started it and we are back and forth, is it a war? I don't know. We can say trade war, but that's really different than what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. That's we're levying tariffs back and forth. and having negotiations about trade. I don't know that that's an emergency, because we're kind of always doing that stuff. Like, we had tariffs before this. Other countries have tariffs. But I look at it as okay, if a country decides to tax its own citizens on goods that they want from us, are they attacking us? I mean, it seems to me like they're attacking their own citizens. I mean, that's the reason tariffs are effectively a tax, because we pay them. If I want something and you tariff it, I'm paying a tax. So anyway, let's keep the conversation going. I think it's really important to understand what's going on here and what we need to do about it, and whether there's tyranny by the judiciary. That's what my 16-year-old thinks that I am, is a judicial tyrant. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
A Tennessee congressman announces an official congressional investigation into Nashville's mayor. And another judicial decision comes down on Trump's tariffs. We'll have these stories coming up at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. Ominous music. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show. I really appreciate Andy and some of the rest of you guys have, and Brent. Andy and Brent had a really good, and I think they kind of dovetailed the analysis. The question from Brent was, so what has Trump articulated as his view of the emergency that predicates all these executive orders? And I said, well, it's listed in the executive order, but it's just kind of mushy. It doesn't really sort of latch on to this is the specific emergency that it's kind of a buffet, right? Like we're going to throw some other stuff. And then Brent made a great point, and I want to read it in its entirety because I think it's exactly right. Is it the Trump strategy to use a mush EO to get to work, then get to results, and have Congress codify / underwrite it before legal challenges can run their course? Yes. Yes. Totally agree. Unfortunately for Trump, Congress is worthless. So that's the problem that we find ourselves in right now is now Trump's in a legal challenge. He's in a legal battle. The briefs for the appellate level, I think, need to be in by June. So he's got another week or so. It's like June 5th, June 7th, something like that, when the briefs have to be in. But yeah, he really needs Congress to do something here if these tariffs are going to hold. Now, I don't think Trump has the votes in Congress for that to happen. Like the tariff dynamic, and I want to briefly, Nick kind of asked questions about this on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. And I think it's fair. So, and he said, you're saying that countries can tariff us, and if Congress doesn't act, then there's nothing the president can do. He ultimately says, I fear other countries putting our reps on payroll to kill America's ability to retaliatory tariffs. So here's the problem. If we impose tariffs, consumers pay them. Businesses benefit from the protectionism. So basically, we pay higher prices for the thing, but the benefit is American businesses don't really have to compete in the same way because the federal government's kind of putting its hand on the scales and saying, you know what, that thing coming from country X, it's undermining the competitors here in the United States, so we're going to just make it more expensive. So that means that the competitors charge higher prices. The idea that you're going to get lower prices because of tariffs is nuts. It's just that it benefits domestic industry. That's true. But the sort of flip side is true of a country that imposes a tariff on their end of the line. They're doing the same thing there. They're taxing their own people. So our retaliatory tariffs benefit business, hurt individuals, because individuals are ultimately the ones that are paying the higher price of goods. So it has an inflationary effect, just like taxes, just like literal inflation. And so that's kind of the weird thing here is use American cars. If you want to protect American domestic car industry by making other cars more expensive, the domestic industry is just going to raise to right below the level of the tariff, right? It's going to say, well, we can charge up to here because then, our competitive advantage is gone that was artificially created by the government. So the idea that this is like a weapon and it's going to help us, no, it's government economic control. And it's not good for the other countries either. Other countries shouldn't do this, but the question for us is it impacts our certain companies' abilities to sell into other countries. But like if I'm not selling anything to China, I don't actually care about their tariffs. If they want to sell into the United States and I want to buy cheap socks, I absolutely care because I just have to pay more. So the benefits, it's actually a tax that sort of consolidates the benefits. And that's kind of where we're going. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Good morning. It is 31 minutes past the hour of 11 a.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. Your weekend weather forecast is on the way. U.S. Representative Andy Ogles posted on social media today that the congressional investigation into Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell has begun. Ogles said the federal investigation of O'Connell connected to this month's ICE operation is moving forward. Ogles posted a letter from 2 House committees requesting the mayor turn over documents to Congress by June 12th. The Nashville Community Review Board recently called out Ogles for what the executive director described as a reckless social media post amid the recent immigration and customs enforcement activity. Ogles claimed the board was protecting illegal aliens, and now the board said it's getting ugly calls from people all over the country. The public safety operation involving ICE and Tennessee Highway Patrol has led to at least 196 arrests in Nashville this month alone. That's according to the Department of Homeland Security. Several rulings this week on President Trump's wide-ranging tariffs on imports from around the world. Earlier this week, the Court of International Trade in New York blocked the tariffs, ruling that the tariff power rests with Congress, not the president. A federal appeals court yesterday then put that ruling on hold. ABC's Stephen Portnoy, he's in D.C., and he tells the ABC podcast Start Here a similar ruling came down in another case.
There's one other court case that's also moving on a parallel track in a separate jurisdiction, and that's in the district court here in Washington, D.C. Yesterday, Judge Rudolph Contreras found in favor of 2 small businesses who argued that they shouldn't have to pay these tariffs. Now, that judge also issued an order preventing the administration from collecting the tariffs, but that decision's now on pause for 2 weeks. Judge Contreras put his own stay in place.
That is the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
Welcome back to the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith. We're short time now. I appreciate you guys engaging. 615-737-9986. Man, you guys are actually really engaged on tariffs in terms of the intricacies, and I very much appreciate that. Nick continued and said, hey, why do other countries apply tariffs? Nick's really on it. So other countries use, what was that country? It wasn't Singapore. It's big coffee producing country. So we'll say, Brazil or whatever. Well, they are trying to protect, they're trying to protect their domestic industries. It is protectionist trade policy, which incidentally is what liberals support and have supported for generations in the United States, but it is what it is. So the idea is these countries are saying, we make coffee. We want to protect our coffee growers, so we want to make it really expensive for anybody in our country to buy coffee from another country. Well, use that example. I wrote a column about this, and I think it makes sense. In the United States, we don't produce that much coffee, very little, in fact, and we can literally consume all of our own domestic coffee supply and still need a massive amount of imports. We love coffee. So the fact that Brazil or anybody else has protectionist policies on coffee doesn't really matter to us because we're not trying to sell any coffee to those countries. There is no export to tariff, right? So they could have a rate of 1 billion %. It wouldn't matter because we're not sending any coffee over there. Some industries, we do want access to their markets. We do want to sell, and they do have access to our market, and they do want to sell. So in those situations, we should absolutely say, look, we're buying from you. You need to buy from us. That needs to be fair, and we should drop the trade barriers. Where my beef with Trump is on this is he's still keeping tariffs. He's not trying to get rid of them. He's keeping them. Like 10%, he wants 10% regardless. Well, that's not open trade. We're not trying to use this as a negotiating tool. That's just a tax hike. That's all it is. But yeah, so like if for Japan's a great example. If I want people in Japan to buy American cars and I want people in America to be able to buy Japanese cars, so you have a lot of consumer options, so there's competition, so prices go down. Consumers want cars that are more efficiently priced. Well, Japan and the United States should try to have no tariffs on that. You should say, we'll buy yours, you buy ours, let's have competition, and the best car wins. Sweet. But when we play these games, the blanket stuff doesn't really work because you got to look at it case by case. Cars are different than coffee. So that's the answer on, and if you really want to know the truth, I think Trump just likes tariffs. He just likes them. He thinks it's a great thing because he thinks it's, he's a businessman and he's negotiating deals. But really, we want open access to other markets for things we sell. And if there are things that we don't sell, we don't care. So they can tariff whatever they want. They just hurt their own citizens. Same deal for us. I don't want to pay any tariffs. I don't want any importers to pay any tariffs. If I want to buy something, I want it to be competitive. Because as a consumer, I'm not making any socks. So I want the most efficient, competitive, best quality sock for the price. And if you say, well, you need to buy American, cool. You can go right ahead. You can pay $15 for a pair of socks. I might do that once, but I wear a lot of socks. And so I'm not rich. So I can't just go buy $15 a pair of socks. And so I think that that's something to remember is anytime I see the government doing something that imposes a cost on a lot of people and confers a benefit to a small number of people, I generally don't like it. I don't love no tax on tips. You know why? Because why in the world should a fireman be treated differently than a waiter at a restaurant? That's just arbitrary. It's not good. It's not conservative. It's not good tax policy. Same deal here. I'm glad for certain businesses to benefit domestically by government economic engineering. But what about the others? I mean, that stuff drives me nuts because all of us get to pay for it and then certain business owners benefit. I mean, that's the truth. We don't like to talk about that, but businesses that get protection from competition can raise their prices, which hurts the consumer, and we pay taxes essentially on tariff stuff, so it hurts the consumer. So we get to pay more, certain businesses benefit. And you can say, hey, look, well, that protects American jobs. Sure, in those industries. If you're not in those industries, it won't. And there is a lot of economics on tariffs. You don't have to trust me for it. There are a lot smarter people that can explain why it creates drag. I get it as a negotiating tool. I would negotiate tariffs with China all day long and say, no, you open your market to us, we'll open ours to you. End of discussion. If you don't want to do that and you want to basically sell into our market and not buy anything from us, we're going to cut you off. That's great. And look, that's going to happen across the different political. Okay, John, this country ran on tariffs for years with no income tax. The tariff stopped and hello income tax. Which is better? On tax on tips, firemen make in the 30, per waitress, maybe 7. So we'll do the tax on tips first. You are picking economic winners and losers that conservatives hate when Democrats do it. We hate it. We hate that. We're like, why are you rigging the economy? Well, you're telling me that somebody who's a tipped waiter in downtown Nashville at Bourbon Steak, those waiters, they might make $100,000 a year. A lot of it's tips. They don't have to pay tax on that, but somebody else making $75,000 that's not a tipped industry does have to pay it? Tell me more, because I don't like that. It's just not right. It's picking winners and losers. It's not, if you want to reduce taxes, let's reduce them for everybody. No winners and losers, just winners. The tariffs versus income tax. I actually think the best tax policy is something called a Pigovian tax model. I know this sounds like a big word, but it's basically tax things you don't like. Tax things you don't like. You don't like pollution, tax it. You don't like, I don't know, pick the things you want to slow down and tax them. Why do you want to tax? 0639 says, you are just caught up in jealousy about the tip thing. No, I'm not. Those folks work hard, but there are a lot of people, my mechanic works hard too. I work hard. There's a lot of people who work hard. Why do you pick one category and say, no tax for you? It's not right. The idea here with tax policy, tariff policy, all this stuff is government economic engineering is bad. Let people keep more of their money and leave them alone. That is what conservatives used to believe. I would argue that conservatives still believe that, and other people started getting a little weird. Some of you guys are really funny on tax. Andy says double tax on lobbyists. Okay, I mean, like, I'll use that as an example. If you said we're going to have a lobbying tax, one, it's probably going to run into some constitutional trouble. But if you said we're going to tax, we want people to drive less, so we'll tax mileage. Like, there are any number of different things you can tax, right? It's just a government saying, I get some of your money to do government things. But tariffs as old policy, looking at historic tariff use, one, the evidence is still bad for tariffs. Two, the global supply chain has changed everything, and it's not unchanging. I want to be real clear about that. I think we should realize that this is 2025, and we have AI, we have all this stuff. Global supply chains are everywhere, and that's not a bad thing. We are efficiently allocating where stuff's made. So I I'm okay with looking at let's see, 1096 says, Cameron, you're a saint. That's always a good start because it means they're going to tell me where I'm wrong. You're avoiding the fact that tariffs have been a tool for funding. They've lately been used by the enemies of America to deindustrialize and eventually economically destroy the United States. You're not giving any consideration to those facts, and therefore your analysis is simple-minded. Okay, cool. I love tackling these kind of concerns, so thank you for mentioning this. I want to address it, and then we got to take a break. The United States remains an economic juggernaut. The evolution of industrialization happened here. We actually came up with much more efficient manufacturing processes. We came up with all kinds of neat, awesome ways of doing things. No longer do you have to be in a bottle factory, working on the line. We created higher paying jobs, better opportunities, and that's because of free markets and free trade. That absolutely is the case. We remain the largest service economy, production service economy in the world, and second largest manufacturing, and we're the largest consumer of goods and services in the world. We are not falling apart. We still make a lot of stuff in the United States. And what's more important, we buy a lot of our own stuff. I want to say, I looked at this stat a couple weeks ago, we account 60, 70% of our consumption is domestic, meaning we're consuming our own stuff. So we are an economic giant, and the idea that we're sort of falling apart is silliness. It is political hyperbole used to justify bad policies. America's awesome. It's not because of our political class. It's because of our entrepreneurs. It's because of our small businesses and large businesses and all these folks that are coming up with creative ways to do stuff. So I'm not down in the mouth about America. I think we're amazing. And it's not amazing because of the government. So, yes, I'll use China as an example. They're a bad actor. And we should absolutely use tariffs and other tools at our disposal to push back on them. But the idea that we need broad-based tax stuff, we need to tax ourselves more, that's not conservative. Sorry. We got to take a break, and then we'll wrap this thing up. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show on Super Talk 99.7. The next episode's coming. We got Chad. There's Chad in today? Okay, cool. We just have so many questions and so many things from you guys and so little time to address them. 615-737-9986. You guys have been fantastic today, and I want to address a couple of questions because some of them are fun. SB said, why should listeners spend time paying attention to a, quote, substitute who has no political experience and just claims to know? Well, I'm a lawyer by trade. I did work in the United States Senate and the House of Representatives. I did work for a member of the Ways and Means Committee, specifically on trade issues. So I actually do have some specific political experience directly on the point that I'm talking about. I don't know it all, but I do know some of these concepts, and I am principally consistent on them. So I know that's annoying for some folks, but conservatives got a conservative, you know? So I do think, great question from you guys on, well, what about like the EU tariffs on autos that prevent our cars from being sold there? Perfect example of where we should play hardball. That if you're blocking the market for our products in an area that we want to sell, we need to get that trade to those tariffs to zero. I don't. John said, hell, the other host on WTN has no political experience. Fair. The goal here should be to get to zero. And Brent said that. Like, we should want to get to a bilateral tariff of zero on everything. That would be ideal. We need to look and see what we want to sell. If we want to sell something in a certain market, like the EU, and they're blocking it with very high tariffs, then reciprocal tariffs to get them down are fine. I'm not going to argue the point. Use it as a tool. Now, you still have to have legal authority to do it, but I would tell Congress this actually makes a lot of sense. We should use this as a strategic tool. And that's what I kind of want to get at. What's been weird for me is at first it was, well, we're doing all this to get these trade barriers down so we can have true free trade and unleash the American economy. I was actually all about that. And then it was sort of like, and we're going to generate revenue. When you say generate revenue, that's a tax hike. And say, well, we're going to have a 10% tariff regardless. That's a tax hike. And I think that's really a problem for me as a conservative. I don't like it. I'm not going to like it. And I think it would be weird if I did. So, yes, let's get the trade barriers down. Let's get after it. Let's unleash American companies in terms of markets across the world. If they're blocking our products, let's say, hey, look, this is going to be ugly for you if you're trying to sell into America. But otherwise, I don't want higher taxes. I don't want to pay for a lot of random stuff. And it's not one size fits all. You got to be smart about this stuff. And Congress needs to get off its tail and do something useful. Because right now, it's just not. They're blowhards, and we're letting them get away with it. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're doing stuff, and I just don't notice it. It's super double secret. I don't know. I do know you guys have been great, and I appreciate the time. I'll try to get to some of you guys on the Super Talk text line on the way out the door. This is the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.